Mr. McConnell, we're ready for your presentation. 3, which is the recommendation report and zoning bylaw amendment for 103 Dundas Corporation. And for this one, I'm certain we have a delegation, and I believe that it would be useful to have a presentation from our planner, our senior planner, Robert Thun. Mr. Thun, we're all ears, with the proviso that this is really for the benefit of the public. Council is very familiar with the file.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. If I can just get this cursor to start working. There we go. Thank you, Mayor Burt and members of council. This is the recommendation meeting for a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by 103 Dundas for a development at 103 Dundas Street west of an 8-story building, 155 units, residential in nature. The report can be found on page 121 of tonight's agenda. And just for council's information, since the statutory public meeting back in October of 2015, the applicant has acquired a little bit of extra land, approximately 390 square meters, from the easterly neighboring property, which was owned by Mattamy. In your staff report, it is referenced as Block 6, and that Block 6 is strictly for servicing and pedestrian access only. No vehicular access, no built form on it. Staff are presenting the recommendation tonight for this application. The air photo identifies the application area and its context with the surrounding area, and the photo below it reflects a view from Dundas Street, west looking north through the subject property towards Canning Trail. And as you can see from the air photo and the photo itself, Dundas Street is to the south, and there are detached dwellings to the south. To the west, there's the existing Bell Canada facility. To the north are detached dwellings on the north side of Canning Trail and newly built townhouses on the south side of Canning Trail. And to the east is vacant land owned by Mattamy Development, which is also designated Dundas Urban Core. Block 6 that I previously referred to is that small little, I'll call it finger, in this location right here for council's information. That is a portion of the property that they picked up from Mattamy. From a secondary plan and zoning perspective, and I'm going to give you a little bit of background before we get into the secondary plan. Back on June 2nd, 1999, Regional Council adopted ROPA 8, Regional Official Plan Amendment number 8. There are some councillors that still remember ROPA 8. And in doing so, it designated North Oakville as an urban area. It also set population and employment targets. That urban area designation still remains today in the region's official plan. Dundas Street is designated as a major arterial and is also a higher order transit corridor. And from the application perspective, we did receive comments from regional staff on August 28th. They had no objection to the zoning bylaw amendment, subject to the 3 holding provisions, and those are captured in the zoning bylaw amendment before council. From a local perspective, many of the councillors are aware that the subject property is governed by the policies of the North Oakville East Secondary Plan. That secondary plan was approved in 2008, January 11th, 2008, by the Ontario Municipal Board. That plan set out the community vision, its structure, sustainable development strategy, a community design strategy, the land uses and community services framework, and also a growth management strategy. So in short, the site is designated Dundas Urban Core, consistent with everything that had preceded it through the planning process. Specifically, section 7652 outlines the permitted uses, and it does include medium and high density residential. In addition, section 7653 does stipulate that the maximum height for Dundas Urban Core development is 8 stories. The site is zoned existing development and DUC, which is Dundas Urban Core Special Provision number 2, that latter special provision related to the lands they picked up from Mattamy. Specifically, the development concept. Prior to that, the statutory public meeting was held on October 7th, 2015, as I had mentioned. Since that time, the concept has evolved to what is before council tonight, which reflects an 8-story residential building containing 155 units. So the T-shaped building in gray right here is 8 stories and 155 units. 190 surface and below-grade tent parking spaces are accommodated, and 34 visitors' parking spaces are accommodated on the site. And that parking reflects the maximum permitted number of parking spaces as per the North Oakville zoning bylaw. So they've maxed out on their parking. Vehicular access will be from Dundas Street West via a shared driveway in the bottom left-hand or right-hand corner here. Consent applications on behalf of Mattamy and the landowner have already been submitted and circulated. Pedestrian access and servicing infrastructure to Kading Trail within Block 6, so in this location right here, and as mentioned, there's no structural development house-wise that is proposed to build there. It is strictly for the services and for pedestrian movements. Sanitary infrastructure will be connected to Dundas Street, so it'll go south. The water and storm will go to the north, creating the water loop. And from a stormwater management perspective, the water going north to Kading Trail go to the pond on the west side of Preserve Drive. Bylaw 2018-18 was created to reflect this development and can be found on page 187 of tonight's agenda. In that, the matters being dealt with in the zoning bylaw relate to the westerly side yard setbacks, the rear yard setbacks, accessible parking. We've included 3 additional parking spots for that. Permissions for rooftop terrace and tandem parking, and also the holding provisions that were requested by the Region of Halton. From an elevation perspective, the slide before council right now is the conceptual plan. You'll see that it is 8 stories. It terraces back or steps back on the north side in this location here from the residential development on Kading Trail, and Dundas Street is to the south. Staff will continue to work with the applicant through the site plan process to further address matters through the site plan process. Matters that have been addressed in the report, both comments, verbal and written, from the public were received through the process in the last 3 years. And also there was a recent email that should be on council's table from a resident south of Dundas Street. The email basically raises several points. I have captured most of those within the staff report already with regards to height, access, noise. When it comes to the sun shadow study, that was undertaken, and the property in question from this resident is not affected by it. We've also looked at the various technical and agency review process matters. Those are captured within the zoning bylaw. It is consistent and conforms with the PPS, the growth plan, and the region's official plan, as I've mentioned previously, and also from an urban design perspective. Urban design staff did look at this, and it's satisfactory, and there is a condition being put forward for recommendation related to the urban design brief. So in conclusion, Your Worship, staff are putting forward the recommendation with regards to the application, as you see before you there, also included in the urban design brief recommendation, and several other recommendations for council's consideration. So Your Worship and members of council, that concludes my presentation and available for questions if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. First, council, I misspoke. We don't have a delegation. I was thinking of the email that's on your desk. And Councillor Knoll, I wonder if I could beg permission to go first. I have a question for Mr. Thun. Going back to the 1999 origin of this, I happen to have been an appellant of OPA 198 at the Ontario Municipal Board, not of ROPA 8. And I believe that staff were involved in the OPA 198 appeals. And I wonder, I just want to recall for everybody that in the OPA 198 OMB case, which was about saving the green space north of Dundas, early in the hearing, the lawyers for the developers got a motion before the member of the board who was deciding things, asking the member to declare this little slogan, which was then used almost every other day in the proceedings. ROPA 8 rules. And the idea of the motion was to get off the table any ability to argue against Regional Official Plan 8 and restrict everybody to only talking about OPA 198. And ROPA 8 was the decision to expand growth north of the Highway 5. So when you said, which is the preamble for this question, so when you said that in 99 the residential and job targets and other matters were set by the region in ROPA 8 and, quote, I heard you say, and it is still in effect, you mean that ROPA 8 still rules, don't you?
The urban area designation and the population and employment targets established in 1999 are still in place and are being used as part of the 2009 official plan for the region. It was the basis of further official plan amendments.
And not to put too fine a point on it, the region is the boss of the town when it comes to land use planning matters. We don't get to ignore the region's plan.
We cannot ignore the region's plan.
Thank you very much. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Worship. That whole conversation was giving me PTSD, frankly, but I have a couple of practical questions about the actual site. I've been involved on this file for a while with respect to the traffic and access to the site, so I just want to clarify what I'm hearing. So the access to this property is strictly right in, right out off of Dundas?
That is correct, right in this location.
And that additional finger, as you referred to it at the top, is and how is that going to be? Because that provides the emergency and service access, correct?
No, emergency and service access will be from Dundas Street.
Really?
Yes.
So
that is a pedestrian servicing component there.
So what is the finger for then?
It is for stormwater management, the pipes. It is for the water service and also the pedestrian access.
Okay,
so if I may, Councillor, from a stormwater management perspective, the grades are being bucked so that the storm flows are captured on the site and pumped to Kading Trail.
Yeah.
So by gravity feed, they will go down to the pond at Preserve Drive.
Okay, I have absolute confidence in the stormwater management piece of this. I am concerned about the access. So we were never able to reconcile any kind of secondary access off the internal roads for service vehicles or emergency vehicles.
No.
Okay. Do we have any other properties like this along Dundas that are in the same kind of configuration where their only access is right in, right out?
Properties, if I may, you have property that's owned by Mattamy in this location right here.
Right.
You have a property that's owned by the previous landowner was Grandy. I'm not sure who the new landowner is right here to the south of the stormwater management pond. That'll be an interesting situation on how that gets it. And it will be from Dundas Street only. And
there's no issues with emergency service providers and everything, because I didn't see any comments from anybody in this report.
What will happen along Dundas Street, there will be knockdown medians, or the yellow for access going.
Okay, but that's strictly for emergency access then?
Correct. There will not be pedestrian right or left in going eastbound.
So for clarity, if somebody is going westbound, they can pull into their driveway. If somebody's going eastbound, they have to basically go all the way around a couple kilometers to get to their unit.
Yep. Staff, if you recall, Councillor, we tried working on a street and different versions of that, and the information that was provided to regional staff, it was not supportive. So they said right in, right out.
Well, I wouldn't support full moves on that access either, because I think that goes against the plan for Dundas. Is there any opportunity for additional access when the adjacent properties are built? Does the neighboring property on the west side have access to, is it Kading Trail?
This property right here?
Yeah.
That is Bell.
That's Bell. Oh, that's the Bell building. Okay.
And there are townhouses built, as you can see from the air photo, there's townhouses built on the north side already.
So there's no opportunity for additional, wow. Okay, thank you. Oh, one more thing, just for absolute clarity, because I know we have the email, and one of the concerns the resident had, and we had this down the street when we were approving the other high-density building. So just for clarity, the 8 stories is as of right based on the negotiated settlement of the North Oakville secondary plan.
8 stories is as per the North Oakville East secondary plan.
Right, so that's really not in question tonight whatsoever.
That's correct.
And does the same go for the density on the site? The density is as of right?
The density that they propose is as of right.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Thun.
I have requests to speak from Councillor Elgar and Councillor Grant. Councillor Elgar? Councillor Grant, courtesy to the ward.
Thank you very much. I'm actually just going to dovetail on these safety concerns. I'm assuming at this point, most of this information has been circulated for a site plan application.
They are waiting for the site plan circulation to be, the pre-con to evolve.
Right. Has anything come back yet from the fire department or any of the services?
As we were working through this process right here, their concern was basically to make sure that the Dundas Street ability to go east into the site was available there, and that has been conveyed to the regional staff already through their design.
Okay, well, I guess we'll see that at site plan then. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much. The first question was asked by Councillor Knoll. The second question is, I've heard a couple times tonight bandied around the word targets instead of the word forecast. Did you mean it was a forecast as per Schedule 3? They're forecasts and not targets?
The word employment and residential targets came from 1999, the Regional Official Plan Amendment number 8. They were targets as to what the region as a whole were required to do.
So which takes precedence then going forward? Is it the forecast that's in our Places to Grow Act, or is it ROPA 8?
ROPA is 1999.
Correct.
That's dated.
That's
right now.
dated. So it is forecast now.
Well, you can use the word forecast in 1999. Right now, we have our targets through the Level Oakville plan or through the North Oakville East secondary plan that we have to achieve. You've got Places to Grow, the 72 units per hectare.
Yeah, those
It's
are
those targets that I've dealt with in the staff report that it achieves.
So the target. So you're taking it's the ratio between densities and employment versus residential. But the forecast
This has nothing to do with employment. This is strictly residential nature.
Strictly residential?
That is correct.
So it's not a forecast, it is a target. Well, there is a total difference. Targets are minimums. Forecasts are exactly that. They're forecasts as per the growth plan.
Jane?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The language has changed. In 1999, the region did refer to them as targets. But at this point in time, it's the growth plan language that we're using, and it considers future forecasts of population. So that is in the current planning terms, the correct term that we would use would be forecasts. There are only targets relative to density for specific areas that is applicable in the growth plan and now in our plan. So it's just a change in language from 1999 to the current language is forecasts.
I thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Any other questions? Is there a motion? Councillor Knoll is moving their staff recommendation. Shall I put the question? All in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. That brings us to recommendation. I will ask if there's any members of the public with information for council on this matter who would also like to provide comment. Anyone at all? Thank you. Mr. McConnell, we're all ears.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Burton and members of council. This presentation will provide an overview of the recommendation report, which can be found on page